Picture this. You are walking down a quiet street in Sacramento, California. It is a Sunday morning. The air smells like fresh bread. And there she is, a small, elderly woman in her garden waving at you from behind a white picket fence. She calls your name. She remembers your birthday. She asks about your mother. Everyone on the block knows her. Everyone loves her. And underneath that garden, 9 people are buried. 9. Her name has never been mentioned in the same sentence as Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. Most people have never heard of her. But the case of this woman, a boarding house operator from Sacramento, is one of the most disturbing cases the American justice system has ever seen. Not because of how she killed, but because of how long nobody noticed. Stay with me, because this one will stay with you. Let's go back to where this all started, because to understand who this woman became, you first have to understand what the world did to her. 1929, San Bernardino, California. A girl is born into a family that was never really a family at all. Her name is Dorothea Helen Gray. Her parents drink, they fight. They are incapable of holding themselves together, let alone raising 2 children. By 1938, when Dorothea is just 9 years old, the state steps in and takes her and her younger sister away. 1 year later, her father is dead. Tuberculosis, and then her mother, gone too, a motorcycle accident. Just like that, she has nothing, no parents, no home, no one coming to get her. She grows up inside an orphanage, and if you have never spent time around institutional care, let me tell you what that does to a child. There is no warmth there. No one tucks you in and tells you everything is going to be okay. There is structure. There are rules. There is survival. That is it. Psychologists call it a survival mindset, and once it gets wired into a child's brain, it is almost impossible to undo. But for Dorothea, it went deeper than that. Records suggest she was sexually abused while in care. The details are vague. The press never pushed for more, but the impact is not hard to read. By the time she is 16 years old, she is already married. Not out of love, out of necessity. Marriage was her exit strategy from a system that was about to push her out the door at 18 with nothing. It does not last. She tries again, this time with a wealthy engineer named John Manson. She lies to him about everything, who she is, where she comes from, what she wants. She is charming. She is beautiful. She is completely convincing. And while he travels for work, she opens their home as a gambling den, and then a brothel. When he finds out, he does not press charges. He simply has her committed to a psychiatric facility. The doctors there write something in her file that will follow her forever. Compulsive liar. Creates false identities not just to deceive, but because the real Dorothea Gray is someone she has never been able to accept. She serves 4 months, walks out, and somewhere along the way marries a Mexican man named Puente. They last 17 months. He allegedly abuses her. She files charges and walks away, but she keeps the name. From here on, she is Dorothea Puente. And the first person to truly understand what that name meant was her best friend. Her name was Ruth Monroe. Ruth was not a stranger, not a random target. She was the closest thing Dorothea had to a real friend. They shared a home, shared meals, shared their lives. Ruth trusted her completely. Dorothea noticed that Ruth had money. That was the beginning of the end. She started slipping sleeping pills into Ruth's food, a little at first, then more, night after night, until one evening Ruth was so heavily sedated she could not lift her head from the pillow. That night, Dorothea picked up a pillow of her own. The next morning, she called Ruth's children. "Your mother passed," she told them, calm, warm, sympathetic. "Too much stress, too many pills. You know how she was." Nobody questioned it. But Ruth Monroe was only the first. While serving time in prison for fraud, not murder fraud, Dorothea began writing letters to a man in another state. His name was Everson Gilmuth, wealthy, kind, lonely. He fell completely for the charming woman writing to him from behind bars. When she was released, he was waiting outside in a brand new 1980 Ford truck, ready to build a life with her. He had saved her. She killed him anyway. She hired a carpenter to build a wooden box, told him it was for storing old kitchen equipment. The carpenter had no reason to ask questions. She put Everson Gilmuth inside that box, had the carpenter dump it at the river. It sat there for years, unidentified, forgotten. It was not until Dorothea's arrest in 1988 that anyone connected those remains to the man who had driven across the state just to bring her home. Let that sink in for a second. She killed her closest friend. She killed the man who loved her enough to wait for her outside prison. If she could feel nothing for them, she could feel nothing for anyone. By the early 1970s, Dorothea Puente had a system. She would walk the streets of Sacramento at night, near bars, near shelters, and find elderly men and women alone. She would buy them drinks, listen to their stories, make them feel seen. And then, slowly, she would ask them to sign checks, with her name on them. She got caught. Probation, she didn't stop. She got smarter, because that is the defining thing about Dorothea Puente. She was never reckless. Every mistake was a lesson. Every close call made her more careful, more patient, more precise. And then she found her real business model, Social Security. For those unfamiliar, in the United States, elderly people, disabled people, and those unable to work receive monthly government checks. It's a safety net. The money comes in every month automatically, regardless of the recipient's condition, regardless of whether the recipient is still alive. In 1981, Dorothea rents a large Victorian house at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. 6 bedrooms, a generous backyard. She registers it as a boarding house, a care home for the elderly, the mentally ill, the homeless, people nobody else wants. And on the surface, it is extraordinary. Fresh flowers on the table every morning, home-cooked meals, holiday decorations. Social workers who visit regularly describe her as one of the most dedicated, compassionate operators they have ever seen. She donates money back to local charities. She cultivates relationships with city officials. She is, by every external measure, an angel. But here is what's actually happening. Every resident signs over their Social Security check upon arrival. Room and board, she tells them. She handles everything, and she does. She feeds them, she clothes them, she gives them the closest thing to a home many of them have ever had, and she clears over $6,000 in profit every single month. In the 1980s, from people who have absolutely nothing. But money isn't the only thing she's taking. Some residents ask questions, some want their money back, some become difficult to manage. Dorothea has a solution for that too. She keeps prescription sleeping medication in the house. She dissolves it into food, into drinks. A little extra here, a little more there, just enough to keep everyone calm, to keep everyone manageable. But sometimes the dose is too high. And when that happens, she does not call 911. She needs someone with a shovel. Now, think about this carefully. Dorothea Puente is a woman in her 50s. Some of her victims weigh over 200 pounds. Digging a grave deep enough to conceal a body, that is not a one-person job. It takes hours. It takes real physical strength. She didn't do this alone. Neighbors remember a man who used to come around, known only by the nickname Chip. He was always digging, always doing yard work, always available when something needed to go underground. And then, one day, Chip disappeared too, permanently. Investigators believe she paid small amounts of cash, $20, $30, to petty criminals, men with nothing to lose and no one keeping track of them. She didn't need them to kill, she just needed them to dig, to place a body, to fill the hole back in, and to never mention it again. In Sacramento's housing projects, that kind of silence was cheap, because Dorothea understood something most people never think about. The perfect accomplice looks exactly like the perfect victim. And since she never confessed, not once, not even on her deathbed, we will never know exactly who helped her, or how many people they buried together. For 7 years, Dorothea Puente operates in plain sight. 7 years. Police officers come to her fundraisers, social workers have her number saved in their phones. The city of Sacramento, in a very real sense, trusts this woman with its most vulnerable residents. And then, November 1988, a man named Alvaro Montoya, Bert, to everyone who knew him, moves into 1426 F Street. Bert is mentally disabled, gentle. He needs more care than most. His social worker, a woman named Judy Moyes, checks on him every week without fail. And then one week, Bert doesn't answer. Dorothea is not worried. Bert went to visit family in Mexico, she explains. He'll be back. Judy Moyes pauses, because she knows something about Bert that Dorothea apparently forgot she knew. Bert Montoya has no family in Mexico. Judy calls the police. On November 11th, 1988, detectives arrive at 1426 F Street. Dorothea is gracious. She offers coffee. She answers every question calmly, clearly, without a single moment of visible anxiety. But one detective walks out to the backyard. The ground is uneven, multiple areas look recently disturbed. The flower beds don't sit right, they start digging. First body, second, third. The street shuts down, cameras arrive. The neighbors, people who had waved at this woman every morning for 7 years, stand behind the police tape and watch in silence as investigators in white protective suits dig up the garden. By the end of the day, 7 bodies have been recovered from the property, but Dorothea Puente is not watching. Somewhere in the controlled chaos of the scene, detectives coming and going, cameras rolling, radios crackling, she approaches one of the officers. "I have an appointment," she says. "Would it be all right if I stepped out for just a moment?" The officer, not yet fully aware of what is being uncovered behind him, says yes. She walks out the front door. She gets on a bus. And she vanishes. For 4 days, one of America's most wanted suspects rides Greyhound buses through California. She checks into a hotel in Los Angeles. She finds a bar. She sits down next to a retired carpenter named Charles Wilges and introduces herself as a lonely widow, just passing through looking for someone to talk to. He buys her a drink. They talk for hours. The next morning he turns on the television. Her face is on every channel. He calls the police. On November 17th, 1988, Dorothea Puente is arrested outside that Los Angeles hotel 4 days after walking out of the most active crime scene in Sacramento's history. She does not run. She does not fight. She looks at the detective and says quietly, "I have not killed anyone." The trial begins in 1992 and it becomes one of the longest, most expensive criminal proceedings in California history. Nearly a year. Over 150 witnesses, thousands of pages of evidence. And through all of it, Dorothea Puente sits at the defense table looking like someone's retired schoolteacher, hair done, clothes pressed, hands folded, expression serene. The prosecution is methodical and relentless. They argue that Dorothea used a sedative called flurazepam, dissolving it into her residence, food and drinks, gradually increasing the dose until it was lethal. That when residents died, she did not call emergency services. She called people who could dig. Then they read the names: Everson Gilmouth, Leona Carpenter, Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, Betty Palmer, Lloyd Duval, Alvaro Montoya. 9 people, elderly, vulnerable, forgotten by the world long before Dorothea Puente found them. She selected them for exactly that reason. The defense pushes back. Natural causes, they say. Dorothea panicked when residents died and buried them to avoid scrutiny. She was a caretaker who made terrible decisions, not a killer. But the toxicology doesn't lie. Flurazepam in the remains, deliberate burial patterns, a criminal history of targeting the elderly stretching back nearly 2 decades. The jury takes weeks to deliberate. August 1993. Guilty. 3 counts of first-degree murder. Life in prison. No possibility of parole. Dorothea Puente straightens her jacket and is led away without a word. In the years that follow, she grants occasional interviews from prison. She writes letters. She maintains consistently and without apparent doubt that she never killed anyone, that residents died naturally, that she buried them out of fear, that she was a good woman who helped people no one else would help. On March 27, 2011, Dorothea Puente dies in prison. She is 82 years old. She never confesses. She never apologizes. And investigators still believe the true number of her victims is higher than 9. So let me ask you something. Was Dorothea Puente a monster? Or was she something more complicated and, honestly, more disturbing than that? She was not born violent. She was born into poverty, into neglect, into a world that stripped away everything a child needs before she was 10 years old. No parents, no security, no one who loved her unconditionally. Just a system that processed her, damaged her, and eventually handed her back to a world she had never been prepared for. Forensic psychologists who reviewed her case identified a few consistent patterns. The first is a complete erosion of empathy, not sudden, gradual, built over years of trauma that taught her over and over that feelings were liabilities, that caring made you vulnerable, that the only safe way to move through the world was to perform emotion rather than feel it. The second is an obsessive need for control. Everything she built, the boarding house, the city relationships, the image of the selfless caretaker, was calculated. Dorothea Puente never did anything by accident. And the third, the one I keep coming back to, is that she believed her own story, right up until the end. In her mind, she was the hero. The woman who took in the people nobody else wanted, who fed them, clothed them, gave them somewhere warm to sleep. The fact that she was poisoning them, stealing from them, burying them in the garden she tended every morning, that part somehow never made it into the version of herself she carried. That is what makes this case different. Not the bodies, not the money, not even the years she operated with the full trust of local government. It's the smile. The completely genuine, completely convincing smile of a woman who looked at 9 human beings who trusted her with their lives and felt absolutely nothing. The house at 1426 F Street still stands today. The garden is gone, the backyard is paved over, but the neighbours remember. The city remembers. And somewhere in a filing cabinet at the Sacramento Police Department, there are names of people reported missing from that neighborhood during those years, names that have never been matched to a case, people who walked into Dorothea Puente's world and simply never came back out. How many were there? We may never know. If you stayed with me until the end of this, thank you. Genuinely. This case deserves more attention than it gets. If it hit you the way it hit me, share it. Leave a comment. And if you want more cases like this one, subscribe. Because there are stories out there even darker than this, and I'll be here to tell them.